It was at this moment he knew he messed up. I wasn't sure what to think of Snake, given his introduction was just kind of casually getting mad that Gramps wouldn't make him food when he didn't do anything around the farm. But I mean, honestly, this boy came in clutch because I think it's guaranteed our boy Thorfinn would have died. I think the only argument you might be able to make is, yeah, he might have lost an eye, maybe a limb, but maybe then he would still live. But honestly, this boy was ready to go down, and he seemingly was numb to both emotional and physical pain. And if it wasn't for that 1-2 punch, I mean, we saw not one, but at least two of his teeth shatter in the distance as he just slammed him down. I was never more happy to see someone other than maybe the master himself in the Farmland arc so far, because really, I mean, they are just considered products, man. And I think this is such a complex situation in general, because obviously, in a perfect world, they shouldn't have been sold off in general, but if things were actually following in seemingly the master's direction in terms of how he wants to go about things, this should have never happened. But man, Hired Muscle has no chill, especially when you try to make a guy who just has that warrior's thrill. He has this kind of like rose-tinted glasses of how a warrior is. And yeah, he's goofy as hell to watch and laugh at as he rolls around or gets beat up, but they almost turned him into a cold-blooded killer, and that is messed up. I do have a full live reaction to today's episode available on my Patreon, so if you want to see that, consider supporting. But yeah, this episode and just the season in general, we're only 3 episodes in, but this is Vinland Saga greatness. It doesn't miss, it doesn't dip in quality. If anything, it came back strong. Episode 2 increased the quality. Episode 3 skyrocketed the quality. This season ain't playing, man. And it is so heartbreaking to see over such a short amount of time what happened to our boy. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying he always had the most healthy mindset with how his revenge-driven goals were. But I mean, if anything, at least we felt like he was alive, right? There was at least a person there. But I mean, he can't even remember his nightmares. I truly thought when he was freaking out in the stables that they stabbed him. I really did, because they were literally moments prior, during that whole drunken scene, they were talking about how they were going to go kill them. And I was like, oh my god, he's screaming as if someone's stabbing him. Nope, just pure nightmares. And the fact that he can't remember it, to me that's even more heartbreaking. I've had nightmares where I can remember them vividly, and I've had nightmares where I don't even remember what it was. The ones that are harder to get over are the ones you don't know what freaked you out. Even though, in the moment, those vivid ones, like, you're still like, damn man, that was really uncomfortable. At the very least, you're awake, you can rationalize, oh, it was just a dream, this couldn't really happen. But if you can't remember what freaked you out that hard, I mean, the rest of the day, you're completely screwed. And to just see that the only real reaction we've seen from him since being reintroduced in season 2 is him freaking out in a dream. Otherwise, he's stone cold and he doesn't feel like a person. I mean, it's bad enough to just have those slices where like every inch of him was getting cut. He almost lost an eye with one of those swings. He literally lost a third of his ear, or at least a fourth of his ear, and he didn't even flinch. The fact that the whole concept of the fear of death and everyone else was either laughing or freaking out in the case of Einar, and Thorfinn was just, he was ready to die. He literally was saying, my life was absolute garbage, I have nothing to live for. And like, holy man, like honestly, had Snake not been there, we would have just had a moment where he would have been losing limbs limb by limb, and seriously, he would have bled out and probably still wouldn't have reacted. And I don't know how the master would have responded to that, but I mean, I don't know how he's going to respond in general. Granted, it seems like the boy who got absolutely sucker punched probably won't have a job for much longer, but man, what a scumbag. He's such a little parasite. He was like hunching over on people and just whispering these horrible things in their ears. And here's the thing, I still don't know what's gonna happen to this boy. He has, last episode couldn't draw the sword off his back. This episode, just everything about him was pathetic and horrible. And the only thing that really makes sense is there's 2 directions he'll take this guy. Either A, get killed in battle and he'll quickly die, because here's the thing, you don't kick off a season like this and have Einar's village be burned and pillaged if you're not probably going to do the same thing to this at some point. I'm not saying anytime soon, but eventually war's going to come, maybe not directly to their doorstep, but in the surrounding area. And he might end up getting killed very quickly and learning the brutal truth of what being a warrior is, and it's not sunshine and rainbows, or he'll get that brutal wake up and turn into a better person. I'm hoping he turns into a better person, but honestly, who knows with a show like this? Not always do they get those chances to really learn from their mistakes and clear up those misconceptions. because sometimes they get a stab to the heart as they realize that and there's no coming back. But what an episode, man. Like, Farmland is not plain. This is hands down going to be the best content Vinland Saga has seen to date. And we're only 3 episodes in, and I'm pretty confident saying that it's not even just I've heard many manga readers say it was one of their personal favorite arcs. To me, it just feels like this has the most potential, because rather than going from location to location and seeing all these crazy battles, like, yeah, in this episode, we get some drunken brawls, we get some pretty brutal moments, but it's so character-driven, even more so than the first season, and in doing so, Vinland Saga is just amplifying its quality tenfold, and man, I don't know where we go. I did find it interesting, though not surprising before they revealed it, because last episode when we got introduced to that one girl who was on the wagon, I thought she was a part of the family, but quickly into this episode when she was washing her face, if you notice, these are the little details I love what this team's doing. The way her clothes were like sewn together were almost identical to how Thorfinn as well as Einar's was. So it didn't look to me like that most prestigious of clothing. So I was like, oh, she's actually probably a slave or a servant of some sort. But last week, I totally thought she was higher than both of them, but turns out no. And I like the fact that they're going into those little visual details, like when they're initially sleeping, you can see how cracked their tooth is at certain angles, and just the fact that you can actually figure out who's a slave and who's not just based on how their clothing is designed. Those little details go a long way to really immerse you into this world and really show you the difference in status that certain characters have. And the fact that, I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? They are starved, they're overworked, and they are sleeping in hay. They are not physically fit by any means, and the fact that Thorfinn can still stand there and just not even flinch, I mean, they have been through some things. And poor Einar, man, he was ready to die for our boy, and he's getting kicked and beaten. These poor bastards are just so tortured, and I feel so bad for them. But if they weren't dealing with this type of stuff, would this arc be nearly as compelling? No, we need characters we want to root for, we want to see them succeed, and show the brutality of this world, because the more they suffer, the more their triumph victory, whenever it eventually happens, will mean all the more. If they get it, but this is Vinland Saga, they don't always get it. Like, I knew Thorfinn wasn't going to die this episode, even with him getting slashed, but as we got closer and closer, especially when the first cut below his eye and then we saw part of his ear fly off, I was worrying. I was like, man, what are they going to do? Like, how far are they going to push this? I was under the assumption that maybe the female slave would then tell the master, because she seems to have a connection of some sort, given that she was riding in that wagon with him. So I thought maybe he would come in and like fire their ass, and then they would come back at some point all pissy and drunk. Instead, Snake, the dude who just casually looks like a slob and has no, like, oh, if you're not gonna make me food, I'll just leave and find someone else who can. I was like, man, what's this prick doing? And then by the end, I'm like, hey, Snake, you now best boy, what's going on here? Next episode could come around and he could do even worse things to our boys. I don't know, but this is an emotional ride. It's absolutely fantastic. Vinland Saga been one of my personal favorites ever since pretty much the show kicked off in season 1, and even with a decent wait for season 2, it hasn't left that spot really. So I'm excited for more. Thoughts and feelings yourself down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new around here. Also ring that bell if you want to get as many notifications to the channel as possible. And like I mentioned, full live reaction is available on the Patreon. And while you're there, you'll also get yourself a video shoutout like Mikaru Takai, Ashy, and Fluid Druid are getting today. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.